I'm Matt Clark, Practical Fishkeeping's website editor.
And I'm Jeremy Gave, deputy editor of the magazine.
And this is the third Practical Fishkeeping video podcast. Okay, this is quite a good story. A fish keeper has successfully bred clown loach. When you say successfully bred, though, probably some people might look upon it as cheating. He's a professional fish breeder, and he used hormone techniques to inject his clown loaches with pituitary hormone taken from bream to trigger the ovulation of the eggs and get the fish to spawn. And then he mixed the eggs and the milk together and artificially reared the fish. But he is the first person to document the spawning of the fish. The technique's been used believed to be used in the Czech Republic, isn't it? And Southeast Asia as well, to produce clown loaches commercially.
Lots of fish are bred using hormones, like silver sharks especially.
Dantis denisonii, apparently.
Cynodontis,
yeah,
quite a few catfish species. So is this guy an amateur breeder, or is it commercial?
No, he's a professional breeder. Among the other things that he breeds, he's called Oleg Mikhailov. He breeds other species of botia, including Botia almore, which some people call Loachata, a number of different species of Cynodontis, and he's been trying to breed clown loaches for quite some time, but he's previously been unsuccessful. Last week he actually managed to spawn them again and got quite a big batch of 1,500 to 2,000 fry.
Wow.
So he's managed
how
to
many
repeat
females?
it.
One female?
One female and two males. Yeah.
1,500 to 2,000.
They're not big, are they? I mean, clown loaches can get to a good, 12 to 18 inches? Pretty chunky fish, aren't they? But the ones that he spawned are relatively small, sort of
5 inches, was it? I think I read
5 to 6 inches, something like that. Not big fish. So potentially the fecundity of the really big ones, sort of a foot plus, could be absolutely vast.
Yeah. What sort of reaction have we had about this?
Well, a couple of people didn't think it was particularly newsworthy because obviously it hadn't been achieved naturally, which is true.
I've got more reservations about that.
But at the end of the day, nobody else has previously documented anything about breeding clown loaches. We've had a report recently from Colin Dunlop, one of our contributors, who successfully got eggs from his fish.
So but successfully spawned them?
Yeah, that was a natural spawning. We've previously published a story in the magazine in 1996 or 1997 by a reader who claimed to have spawned them, but he didn't provide any evidence at the time, and a lot of people are very dubious about whether it was actually achieved or not. And then there's Joe Nethersell from the FBAS.
Yeah, now I got some grief over this because I commented on the Colin Dunlop story and said I know of a guy who's bred them in his 14-foot long tank, and I got attacked by a couple of people on the news story who said, "Why didn't you tell me about this?" Blah blah blah. Well, the reason I didn't tell you about it is so far it's just hearsay. I heard it second or third hand, and since then I've tried to find out more about this kind of phantom spawning, but apparently he didn't see it happen. He cannot prove that it happened, although he has very old adult fish and then a load of new ones turned up without him adding anything in years. So we need to suspect that perhaps they spawned in there, and he doesn't want to publicise the fact or really go into depth about it until that he can prove and show his methods, etc. So sorry about that. I didn't want to aggravate anyone, but it's just hearsay. I just thought I'd add my 2 pence worth, but obviously it wasn't appreciated by everyone.
Going back to the story, though, it is quite interesting, I think, that somebody's actually documented it for the first time, because they've been bred for quite a few years, apparently, in Southeast Asia and more recently in the Czech Republic, but nothing has been said about how they breed. So although it is an unnatural way to spawn the fish, the information may be of use to somebody that wants to breed them through natural means, really. Now,
I spoke to someone from Loaches Online about this story, and they were kind of already aware of it within a day or two.
Yeah, he'd actually posted on our site around the same time.
Yes, and they said just to be careful because this could lead to possible hybridisation with bovine loaches, and it could go the same way as some of the Cynodontis have gone.
That's right, yeah, because some of the people that are in the Czech Republic are believed to be using similar techniques by injecting the fish with pituitary extract to trigger them into spawning to produce hybrid Cynodontis, and there are a number of Cynodontis on sale in the trade at the moment, which are are being sold as new species or under invented names, which are quite clearly hybrids.
Yeah, and it's difficult even to find a true multipunctatus from Tanganyika, a true petricola. A lot of shops I see have got fish labelled as petricola, and they're not. They are hybrids.
It's sad that the breeders feel the need to do that, but I don't think there's any evidence that Oleg is actually doing that with his fish.
No.
The pictures that I saw of the other fish that he's producing don't appear to be hybrids to me. But yeah, it's great, I think. I mean, it's clearly shows how difficult they are to breed for professionals as well, because he's been trying to spawn the fish artificially for a good few years, and he's only recently succeeded with it, so yeah, that's got to be a good thing, really.
The photographs are interesting as well, because I've never seen clown loach fry before.
No,
obviously.
Interestingly, they've got 4 stripes on them.
Okay.
And the third one starts to disappear as the fish gets bigger,
Really?
which is quite interesting, I think. Maybe that's something to do with, you get quite a lot of unusual mutations in clown loach patterns. Maybe it's the loss of the 4th stripe which causes the mutations in the stripe patterns. Who knows? Interesting story, that one, anyway.
And the next news story is UK scientists find first fish to hibernate over winter. Now, I've looked at this only briefly, Matt, so perhaps you can explain what this story is about.
Yeah, some people from the British Antarctic Survey were studying the fish called Notothenia coryiceps, which is found in the freezing waters of the Antarctic.
It looks like a blenny or a goby.
It looks like a blenny. It's actually a member of the family called Nototheniidae, which is a cod-related family. I think it's a gadiform. And it reaches about 60 centimetres or so. They're normally a bit smaller than that. But it's adapted to live in the really cold waters of the Antarctic. The water there can be 0 or less. And to live in water that cold and prevent the ice crystals forming in the fish's body, they've actually evolved special proteins called antifreeze glycoproteins, which basically bind to ice crystals and stop ice crystals forming in their tissues and causing the fish trauma, basically. And they followed these fish by diving into the freezing cold waters, wearing presumably protective diving gigs. It must be unbearably cold. And they'd monitored in captivity, I believe, the heart rate, activity, metabolism and growth of the fish, and found that they were very sluggish over the winter, and that they showed a reduction in metabolism and heart rate and other things during the winter months.
And that's when the water's colder?
No, the water's the same temperature pretty much all the time, but the light levels are different.
Okay.
And presumably, I don't think it's actually stated in the British Antarctic Survey press release, but presumably the reason why they stop being active in that period is because there's less food around. And if there's less food around, they'd be
because the food chain is algae and
so it's light related,
etc.
So presumably they sleep or rest during that period to conserve energy. But it's the first recorded example of hibernation in a fish, so quite an interesting one.
Does a carp not hibernate, kind of, or?
Well, they slow down, but I don't think it's true hibernation.
Some fish don't feed in cold water, do they? But that's...
Yeah, I think that's just slowing down. I think hibernation's probably got a slightly different definition that I don't know. But yeah, it's an interesting story, so have a look at that. There's a nice little video from the British Antarctic Survey on there as well, which shows the people diving under the water and observing the fish in the wild. And you can see the massive diversity of invertebrate life in the area as well, which is probably not what most people expect it to be like.
Yes. Child hospitalised after drinking fish medication. A toddler's been treated in hospital after drinking a commercially available product for treating aquarium fish parasites. Yeah,
I found this in a medical journal, and not that I read them very often, I was just looking for stories. But a 3-year-old girl in America drank up to a 2-ounce bottle of a product called Wardley Ickaway, which is designed for treating white spot. And it's based on a 0.075% malachite green, which is believed to be carcinogenic, cancer-causing.
I thought it would contain more malachite than that. It's hardly anything.
So I don't know. I'm not sure what the normal levels of malachite are in there. But basically, she was observed by her brother and sister, who were sort of 6 or 7, drinking the contents of this bottle. And they ran to fetch their father. And by the time
they observed her drinking it.
Well, they're children.
They waited for her to stop and then said
it's
no.
It's amazing that you could actually drink it. You'd think it would taste disgusting, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Anyway, so she managed to drink this entire, pretty much, bottle of Wardley Ickaway, and her dad found her, and her lips had gone blue. Unsurprisingly, I would suspect.
Because the treatment's blue.
Yeah, and her nails had gone blue as well, and they took her to the hospital, and she was awake and crying. And by the time she got there, she had something called cyanosis, which is a blood disorder caused by lack of oxygen. No, it's blueness, isn't it? Blueness of the skin. But she'd also turned blue due to the lack of oxygen, and her head and her arms and her feet and her legs had all turned completely blue. And she developed a condition called methahemoglobinemia, which is the same thing that fish get when they've got nitrite poisoning. Basically, the iron bit of the hemoglobin in your blood becomes oxidised, and it prevents it from carrying oxygen. So basically, her body was being starved of oxygen. And they treated her in the emergency room, as they call it in America, with another fish disease treatment, bizarrely. Which I didn't know this was used, but they used methylene blue, which is a really old-fashioned treatment for treating fungus.
There is no way that I would want methylene blue inside me.
No. Anyway, but rather than turning even more blue, she actually started to go pink, because...
So what did they use then? Potassium permanganate?
the methylene blue did something to her blood, basically, and prevented this iron part of the hemoglobin being oxidised. And she made a full recovery, but I think it just shows the importance of keeping aquarium products out of the way of children. In the paper, the guy that wrote it, Henry Spiller, said that they'd checked all of the medical records over the last 50 years, I think it was, and it's the only recorded case of malachite green poisoning.
How long ago was this?
Well, the paper was published this year, but it could have been last year, I believe.
Because I remember a couple of years ago, American companies like API, Aquarium Pharmaceuticals Inc., they had to change all the caps on their test kits.
Oh, right, maybe it's related.
To meet with American legislation.
Yeah, because you'd think they would already have them, wouldn't you? I mean, most products here, if not all of them, have already got those, haven't they?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure my children wouldn't be able to take the lids off, but I always do keep the products up high anyway. But I think it shows the importance of doing that, because if your children get hold of these things under your tank, could be good. Not good for your children.
No. And now to the blog section, one of my favourite parts of the website. Always look at the blogs, there's always something interesting being talked about. This is one of my blogs this time, and it's called Do Your Fish Get As Big As They Say in the Books? Myself and Matt have talked about this on many occasions. We've both got old books, and obviously we used to use them when we were young, but the fish sizes today, with the modern fish sizes, or the average fish sizes, seem way out. I'm talking swordtails at 7 inches long, cardinal tetras at over 2 inches long, rosy barbs at 6 inches. When was the last time you saw a 6-inch rosy barb?
Not ever, I think.
And so my question in the blog was, did fish used to get that big? Are the measurements wrong? Are fish getting smaller as we inbreed them and line breed them, etc.? And I just wanted to know what you lot thought about it.
Well, my personal opinion, in terms of obviously the things that have been commercially bred, like the live bearers, which have been selectively bred to get different colours and other traits, almost certainly they're getting smaller.
The thing is, though, with guppies, though, Matt, is that a captive bred guppy is actually larger than a wild guppy.
Oh, right.
So they've got larger females and larger males.
I'm not sure about the swordtail specifically, but I can remember when I was a kid, my dad had wild green swordtails, and they were huge.
Yes.
Sort of. Well, obviously I was smaller then, so then everything was a lot bigger. But they were a good 4 or 5 inches at the very least, body length.
And so it would seem that these swordtails actually did used to be larger, because several people have backed this up with evidence of them keeping them themselves. And also fish like mollies. I remember mollies being huge, and you just don't see large mollies anymore. Now, people have got different theories on this, and we've had lots of comments on it.
The other thing that one of the readers picked up, Rupert Collins, he suggested on the site that the reasons for the discrepancies in sizes were partly due to old-fashioned taxonomy. Basically, in the Victorian times and before, when people used to describe species, they'd look for the very largest and use those as the basis of their description. So when describing a fish and saying how big it grew, they'd find the really huge ones and say that it reached that size, whereas most of the population actually probably don't grow quite that big.
So this is almost like with human beings, can grow to 9 feet tall, but usually smaller.
Yes, exactly.
I see.
And obviously fish base and sites like that tend to report the maximum size that they grow to, whereas the realistic size that they reach in the wild or in captivity is generally a lot smaller.
Yeah, having said that, I did hear a recent account of some very large swordtails, and they were kept by a guy who put them almost in a kind of concrete canal system. And apparently if you give live bearers lots and lots of length to swim up and down, they do grow quite a bit larger.
Wow.
But I haven't seen them.
Right, the next blog now is Become an Undercover Reporter, which is one of mine. Basically, this is an update on the citizen journalism project that we did. You might have remembered from the last podcast we mentioned it. Basically, in the first one, we asked people to ring their shops and get advice on cycling and aquarium, and we published an article based on the data that they collected, showing that most shops don't really give great advice on cycling and aquarium. Not because they're not recommending fish cycling every time, but often because they're suggesting exposing fish to pollutants in the water. This time round, the readers of the forum have suggested that we ask shops what they think about goldfish. So we've asked the readers to contact their local stores anonymously by telephone and ask them a few questions about setting up a goldfish aquarium, all completely undercover, and then report back to me. And once all the data's in, we'll make another story and we'll report it on the website.
And so what sort of things are you looking for on this blog? Are we asking them to ask for tank size recommendations?
Yeah, we're asking things like how big do the fish grow and what size aquarium will I need and do I need a filter, that kind of stuff. So it's pretty basic goldfish advice really. Should only take a couple of minutes.
And we expect the results will be really varied.
Well, to be honest, the early results that are in are actually quite depressing. Yeah. Maybe it's unsurprising, but...
Yeah, goldfish always get a bad press because they get to 12 inches long, but then so do Oscars, and Oscars we'd say a 4-foot tank and frown on anyone who wanted to keep them in a bowl. But with goldfish, we've always had this thing about, it's almost like will they survive in a certain size tank as opposed to actually
they do get a very
thrive.
rough deal of it really, don't they? But it'd be very interesting to see what the results are like when they come in really. If you're interested in taking part, we really could do with some extra data. It doesn't matter if there's been any duplication, so the more people that take part, the better the article's going to be. So you can find out the details on how you can take part both on the forum and on the blog. Just look for the Citizen Journalism Project and you'll find it there. My pick for this week's Your Tanks, or this month's Your Tanks, is a tank by Lee Nuttall.
I love
from
this
the
tank.
forum. It's brilliant. I think it's a gorgeous tank. It really makes me want to keep Central American
Me
cichlids.
too, definitely.
It's a huge 300-gallon tank, and it's filled with a really nice mixture of large Central American cichlids, a few small Central American cichlids like Cryptoheros, Cutterai, and some swordtails in there as well. And the substrate looks great. It's a mixture of sand and gravel, big boulders, bits of driftwood, branches.
No plants.
And no plants, no. And the background is a back to nature aquarium background. Yeah. I think there may actually be more than one in there. Because
I don't think they make them that large, do they?
No, I think it must have been spliced or something, but it looks great.
The overall effect is awesome.
It's a stunning tank.
And even with no plants, it looks exceptionally good. And it probably, not that I've been to Central America, you would assume that it's representing the biotype really well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's more fish in there than you'd find in the same sort of habitat in the wild, but it does look really natural, and the fish all look really, really stunning. There's Vaiaspin spiller in there.
Gutulata.
Yeah, Gutulata or Regani. Cutterai, big swordtails. What else have we got
Has he
here?
found that any of his Vaia species have hybridised or spawned with each other at least?
I don't think he's mentioned that. Cutterai are spawning in the tank.
Yeah.
There's some pictures of the Cutterai frying there, defending them against the other fishes.
He's got some multispinosa there as well.
Tilapia multispinosa.
Rainbow cichlids.
And it's quite interesting to watch the little tiny, comparatively, Cutterai defending themselves against much bigger fish, really.
Yeah, Cutterai is a relative of the convict, or used to be in the same genus as the convict.
Well, it used to be considered the same species as Spilurus, didn't it?
Yes.
It was sold in the trade a few years back, or 10 years back, as a type of Spilurus Cutterai, I think it was. And only recently it's been described as a species in its own right.
And in true cichlid fashion, these fish really defend their brood against all comers.
Yeah.
He's got a black belt in there. He's got some pear's eye.
Pear's eye are gorgeous, aren't they?
Pear's eye grow huge.
They're like 16 inches, aren't they?
Yeah, there was reputedly one over 18 inches kept by a guy in Wales, and he used to feed it on chappy dog food.
Wow. I remember going in to a public aquarium in France once, and they had a huge Central American tank there, which had Petinia splendida and some big pears in it, and they were big. They were probably 18 inches long. The Petinia anyway.
I love big Centrals, and you very rarely see a whole large tank given over to them these days. They're kind of out of fashion.
They are a bit, yeah. And they're stunning fish. I mean, I think he says that the fish in that tank have actually grown to that size in about a year.
I'm sure.
Which is amazing, really.
Yeah.
If I had a big enough house with strong enough floors, I'd really love a tank like that. It really is beautiful.
Yeah, it's really good.
Definitely the best Central American tank I've ever seen, I think.
Ever seen?
I'd say so, yeah. I can't recall seeing one any better.
You've seen mine? Only joking, I haven't got one. The next tank that I found is by Joshua Powell. It's a high-tech planted tank, 48 by 12 inches by 21 inches high, 198 litres or 44 gallons. High-tech tank, he's got 175 watts of lighting on there, so lots of light, and then an extra 64 watts of lighting, so loads of lights.
And it's his first ever planted tank, he says, which is quite impressive, really. And it's got some very lush growth of plants in there.
The EI method, which is very popular, which is the nitrogen and phosphorus dosing method, which is taken on by a lot of people these days. Plant coloration is good.
Yeah, it's got some beautiful red plants in there.
He's got some difficult species, which obviously with high light and the EI method, they become a lot easier to propagate and to grow. But I think that the fish match it really well as well. He's got a group of 8 praecox or dwarf neon blue rainbow fish, and they look really good and really happy. And obviously in a planted tank you get very good water quality because all the ammonia etc is taken up by the plants. So yeah, it's just a nice tank and one that caught my eye, and it's been given
5 stars.
5 stars.
Yeah, that's a really good score. It's been on there for a while as well, I think. A good couple of weeks so far, but he's given some quite interesting information about the dosing methods that he's using as well. So if you want to get some tips on growing a plant, plants in your tank, it's worth a quick read. Okay, we've covered this tank before, but we thought we'd just give you another update on how it's going. It's Simon Dickinson's really nice planted tank. If you can see from the pictures here, it's just looking great now. These pictures were taken at weeks 8 and 9, and he says he's had small issues with beard algae on the Java ferns. So he added some Crossichyla siamensis, Siamese algae eaters, to try and get rid of that. And that's cleared the algae up, but it's still looking great, and the plants are growing really well.
It's amazing how quickly these high-tech planted tanks mature, isn't it, or look mature.
I mean, that looks like it's been running for a long time, doesn't it? Not 2 months. I mean, the growth of the glossostigma on the bottom of the tank is several inches thick now. It's lush, isn't it?
He's got the notoriously difficult Rotala green, which is a favourite of Takashi Amano in the back there, and you can kind of clip that if you're clever enough and if it grows well enough, and produce a kind of a mound, and his is starting to do that. It's forming quite a nice green mound in the corner.
I can't really imagine that you can improve on it any more than it's actually done now, really.
Yeah, it's interesting because the things with these planted tanks, the plants grow so quickly that they almost overgrow.
Yeah.
So in 12 weeks' time it might look totally different, but not as good as it does now. It's difficult to say.
He'll probably spend most of his time pruning everything, really, to keep it all in nice order. But it's a very impressive tank, really. He's got a lovely marine tank as well, which we've previously shown. Okay, well, the next thing we're going to cover is not a tank, but a breeding success. Somebody from our forums, A.D. Wood, Andrew Wood, who is the editor of the British Cichlid Association journal, Cichlidae, recently reported that he'd bred Pterophyllum leopoldi, the leopoldi angel, which isn't a particularly common fish in the hobby, and certainly not one that's very commonly bred.
I was looking for some a while ago.
Yeah,
nice. They call them dwarf angels. They're not that dwarf, but
they're
smaller.
Slightly squatter, aren't they?
Smaller than Scalari.
And they've got quite a distinctive spot just below the dorsal fin. Maybe, well, possibly not quite as attractive as Scalare and
they're an acquired taste, I think.
Yeah,
I think
they can look a bit strange, I think.
Yeah.
But when they spawn, as you'll see from the pictures, they are a really gorgeous fish. And his have laid some eggs on a leaf in his aquarium. He gave them a discus spawning cone as well, but they didn't lay the eggs on that. And he's recently got free swimming fry, and he sent us some video of that. which you can see here.
And the good thing about these angels, which are closer to the wild form, were these wild or F1? Or?
They're wild. Apparently he got them from the Goldfish Bowl. He saw them in a display tank there and basically begged the Goldfish Bowl to sell them to him, which they did.
And the great thing about wild angelfish, if they do spawn, they generally tend to raise them because that's what they do.
Exactly.
In the
a
wild.
lot of the captive ones are pretty rubbish parents, and these ones have managed to get the fry to free swimming straight away. And they're looking good, really, aren't they?
Yeah, it's
impressive feat, that.
I still wouldn't mind some myself.
Yeah, very nice.
Okay, I'm afraid that's all we got time for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in a month's time for the 4th episode of Practical Fish Keeping Podcast.